Welcome to Lead Live, a conversation for ministry leaders by ministry leaders. I'm Josh Franks.
And I'm Clint Berry, and we're the co-founders of the Lead program. Today on Lead Live, we're joined by Rich and Alyssa Brown from Inkalink to talk parenting and ministry. Hey leaders, welcome into another edition of Lead Live. My name is Clint Berry, alongside my friend and colleague, Josh Franks. I'm trying to do that football intro, you know what I mean? They're always like that on the Fox Sports, Josh. They say, it's alongside the Hall of Famer, Josh Franks. That's right. So yeah, someday we'll do that. Maybe there's an Alliance Hall of Fame that you could be a part of, and then I could just give you a gold jacket. That would be good.
Yeah, look forward to that day, and I plan on being the biggest bust in the Hall of not the bust, but
the head.
The head.
All right. Well,
there you go.
There we are. Hey, how was your weekend? How was ministry at First Alliance? What's God doing, man? What are you seeing?
It was good. We finished up our global outreach conference, and one of the things we were really praying for this week, when we ran about 8 days of a global outreach conference in conjunction with other Alliance churches in our city. And that's always a beautiful thing. One of the things we were praying was for God to raise up kids, teens, and adults that would sense like he may be calling them to go overseas. And we saw actually a lot of that from our church. Kids that were stepping into that, whether at a level of curiosity or confirmation or somewhere in between. And so that was really exciting, just a cool answer to prayer. And then the rest of the week was brilliant. God's moving in amazing ways all over the world. And so we continue to celebrate that.
Nice.
How about you?
Yeah, it was a good weekend. We also had, the privilege of having an Alliance missionary with us. And it was just really neat to hear what God is doing around the world, story after story after story of God putting all these pieces together. And you know how it is, man. These workers get going on the stories, and they could just tell stories about what Jesus is doing for hours. It was just a real joy to listen and just kind of be caught up in some of the story. Josh, speaking of stories, a couple of weeks ago, we launched what we're calling the 1002 campaign. And for those of you who are watching, and we would love to invite you to join us into this campaign that we want to give from the harvest to the harvest, and daily praying Luke 10:2, that Jesus would raise up more workers from the harvest for the harvest, as that verse suggests. And that also a way for you to get involved in that campaign is to literally join us in gifting $10.02, whether it be monthly, weekly, or daily. And so Josh and I want to invite you into that. You can go to leadcma.org/10-02, and you can make a contribution and join us as a financial partner to see more leaders from the harvest for the harvest raised up. And there's lots of different resources and actions that you can take when you go to leadcma.org/10-2. All right. Hope you join us. Now, Josh, an important topic, and one that we've not really explored yet on Lead Live, is the issue of parenting. And I know that with raising my two, I know our boys are about 10 days apart, so we're both in that same kind of age and stage. But ministry balance, parenting, all the issues that goes along with that, including your family in the ministry. Oh, maybe I just included them too much, right? There's so many challenges that comes along with not only, being a great husband and or wife and daddy or mother, but then also all the ministry things that come along with that. Give me some opening thoughts on this conversation of parenting and ministry that we're going to enjoy today.
Yeah, I totally agree with the things that you said. And I think when it comes to ministry and church leadership, there's a lot of potentially healthy requirements, but also many unhealthy stigmas that are a part of that correlation. And I wonder if during our time today, we can maybe unbind or uncouple some of those stigmas and help people figure out some really healthy and positive steps that they can take as they are parents and ministry leaders.
That's good. Yeah. So to join us for this conversation, we've invited Rich and Alyssa Brown to join us. Guys, thanks so much for being on Lead Live today. We're so grateful that you would take some time out in order to join us. So welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. We're really excited to be here. We love this topic, and we're really, really excited to learn together. We always learn new things on these kind of things.
Yeah, we're happy to be here and learn from you guys as well as we do talk about these topics of children and parenting and ministry. There's all kinds of angles that we can go at and so many nuances, but we'd love to share a little bit what we've learned. But man, one of the first things we always say is we're not the experts. We're not experts at all. We just have 4 great kids, and you know, who knows how they'll turn out in the end, but they seem pretty good right now. And whatever we've learned, we'd like to share with others.
Well, that's great. Why don't you take a minute to introduce yourselves, your children, and your ministry with Inkalink, that we are really proud of our partnership between the LEAD program and Inkalink. So go ahead and share a little bit about what you do in your family.
First of all, our oldest is 27 years old, and she's married and lives in Maryland. Her husband works for cybersecurity for the government, and they're expecting our first grandbaby. Can't wait. Yep. And December 1st is the due date. And our second is 25 years old. And she is studying to get her master's degree in education. She was a missionary with Inkalink for a year and did some training in Argentina as well, and is coming back to get her master's degree. And Josiah is also our third. Our first was Olivia, second was Shayla, third is Josiah. He's our third, and he's 23 years old. And he just finished his master's degree. He's finishing it up right now in sports psychology, wants to be a soccer coach, maybe overseas someday. And then our youngest is 20 years old. Her name is Alexa, and she's studying in her second year at University of Central Florida. Maybe psychology, maybe what else? Hospitality. We're not quite sure where she'll end up, but she's in Orlando studying that. So that's kind of a little bit about our family. Both Lisa and I grew up overseas. I was born in Ecuador. My parents were missionaries with the Alliance for 45 years in Ecuador, and Lisa's parents in Argentina and Australia for 45 years.
Yeah.
That's
so
great.
We grew up overseas. We feel very comfortable in South America, and obviously we're children of parents in the ministry, and so we lived it all. And then we have kids, and we're very much involved in the ministry too. So
that's awesome. Thanks so much for being here. If you're joining us on Lead Live today and questions, maybe you're a ministry leader and you have a specific question about something you're experiencing in your family with your kids or in your church, please put those in the comments, and we will do our best to get to those during the show. So Rich and Elisa, I appreciate you sharing about your upbringing. And what are some of we've all heard of like the stigmas of, oh, they're a pastor's kid or a missionary kid or something like that. So what are some of the stigmas and unique issues or concerns that maybe parents that are also ministry leaders might experience?
I mean, I think right off the bat, parents in ministry, the first thing is we always think about being the example and the pressure that we have, obviously, of if our family, if we can do well with our family, then what we say from the pulpit and everything that we do is given clout. But if our families are wrecked, then, biblically speaking, we shouldn't have any kind of leadership in the church, right? So the very first big battle that we have is, we have to be this exemplary family. We have to be this perfect family. And we always go around teaching to everyone that there is no such thing as a perfect family. God did this on purpose. Like, if you look in the Bible, you're not going to find a perfect family. We can start right at the beginning with Adam and Eve, and none of us are going to say, oh, hey, I want that kind of a family. I mean, those kids, right? The brother that killed the other brother, and
that's
on
not good.
down the line, just one after another, you go, wow, God, the people that you choose, definitely not perfect family lives, but God does it on purpose because he wants to show his redemption and the grace that he has for us, imperfect people, imperfect families. Now, if we could only get the congregations to understand that God is revealed through our imperfections, that would be great. But we do worry about impressions. And we also always talk about the spiritual life of our kids is more important than any image that we're trying to sell. And
or protect.
Because I'm thinking of this immediately because I've just recently talked to someone on the phone. She's a pastor's wife. She was a student in the seminary with me, and her oldest son is involved very heavily in drugs, and to the point where his life is on the line. And she calls me and she's crying, and I say to her, you have to go get help. It now is something we need a professional. And she's petrified to do so because she's afraid that then her husband will lose his job as the pastor. And, then how will they feed all the other kids? And even if they get to stay in the church, will anybody listen to a word they have to say? It's almost like it cancels everything. If you have a rebellious child or any problems in the family, it will cancel out every other help that you could give or any leadership that you might have spiritually. So we just had to get to that basic line that is the spiritual life of your kid is more important. And we have to just trust in God in both situations, in the life of your kid, and start taking steps to help him. And then we have to be vulnerable with our congregations and say, hey, this is a struggle that we're having. And it's more important.
It seems as though there's like lies of the enemy, as well as maybe some touchiness when it comes to the interpretation of the scripture. What you said at the beginning was like, hey, if we've got a wayward child, like we shouldn't be in the ministry. It's like, well, wait, like, so I feel like there's that tension biblically, but then there also is, they're totally going to kick me out if they know. They're not going to listen to me anymore. And those things are lies from the enemy, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
But can we unpack a little bit of like what you're saying? Because I think you're onto you're something really that we need to mine out a little bit more. So let's tackle the biblical issues first. I think we're going to 1 Timothy 3, if I'm not mistaken. So if we dive into 1 Timothy 3 just a little bit, and Paul's talking about like really managing your own household well.
Yeah.
What are we talking about then when a kid does get themselves into a mess? You know what I mean? Like, and they're being sinful people, right? What is the tension there that ministry leaders are feeling? How do you work that out? Could you talk to us about that?
Absolutely. That's really the crux of this whole issue, is how do we uphold the biblical standard and at the same time be good parents to our kids? And when do you draw the line between, well, my kid is also a human being who can make their own decisions. Yep. And even if I have done what they say in Proverbs, if you instruct the child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart from it.
Yep.
Let's face it, many kids depart from it. And actually what they're talking about is the instruction they won't go away from. So we kind of use that verse to kind of make pastors' kids or any Christian's kids feel like, hey, if you're not following in the footsteps of your parents, you're now no longer really part of us. And parents, by the way, now that your kids are no longer part of us, you really are not the leader that you should be. And so this whole thing of God has made us as individuals and families, so community and family. But in the community, we try to raise our kids in the community, but as an individual, they can choose not to. And that's the beauty and the curse of individualism and being able to make our own choices, and God allowing us to have free will. But the fact that, I think what Lisa mentioned, the fact that the whole Bible is full of stories of families who are not perfect. There's not one family that's perfect, not even Jesus's family. Today you'd go to jail if you left your kid at the church for 3 days or 2 days or whatever, and an 11-year-old, you go to jail for that kind of stuff. So none of the parents in the Bible were perfect either. So why in the church do we try to, first of all, from the congregation, expect perfect parents, and second of all, from the parents to portray perfection? There's many a pastor's family I've seen that they appear perfect. Heaven forbid they'd ever show a weakness from the pulpit or tell a story that shows, a weakness in their parenting skills. Yeah. We're great at pointing out other people's weaknesses, but, and so if we can be vulnerable, I think vulnerability is a piece of that. If we can be vulnerable, but how do we uphold the scripture as well? Paul is talking about, you need to be able to manage your house in a way that's honoring to God. And some of the best managers of their home have kids who are completely rebellious to the king. Yeah. But that doesn't mean they were bad at managing their home. They were great at managing their home. They were great at raising their kids in the faith. Their kids chose, because God's made us that way, to walk away from the faith. And that doesn't disqualify the pastors, the ones who have a calling to do this.
That's good. Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. Because I think that there are numerous second, third, fourth generation believers, growing up, and I grew up in a Christian home, and I made choices, right, and I'm glad that my church family didn't penalize my mom and dad from serving because of the mistakes and the choices that I was making, right? Yeah. And so now, did they pray hard about it? Was it extra stress on top of the ministry that they had? Yes, absolutely. But I think that there's definitely some of that where I do think maybe First Timothy calls to attention. All right, am I managing my household well? Or have I just gone, it's the ministry, and I'm neglecting the things at home? And so I'm glad at some level the scripture brings some of that tension back into it. So it's just not just like, hey, you're in ministry and you should do that all the time, and you neglect everything else. Like there's this, are you managing your home well? Because that is the expectation of leaders is in the church, is that we're going to have vibrant home lives, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And I like the way that Andy Stanley says it in the book, Choose to Cheat. That's the opposite, right? We're like, hold on a second, choose to cheat? That sounds already wrong. Choose to cheat. You're going to have to either cheat your family or you're going to have to cheat the ministry. Yeah. Every day you make decisions that's going to cheat one or the other. And you can't say, okay, I'm just going to cheat the ministry and I'm only going to be with the family. You'll lose your job as a pastor if you do that. Right. Neither can you do, I'm going to be with the ministry and I'm going to cheat my family the whole time. You're going to lose your family. And so daily it's this give and take, and it's not a 50-50 ever. Mm-hmm. We used to try, when we were first married, we tried 100% each. Okay, I'm going to do 100% in each. That didn't work. You can burn yourself out that way. But figuring out every day, sometimes, and the way that we did it in our family was finding a value. What is your family value? One of the values we had was taking our kids to school every day and picking them up. That's what we did. That was a value to ours. Another was we're going to be at their sporting events or whatever they're doing. If they're, in choir or any of their activities at school that we can go to, we're going to go support them in that. And so what that meant was there were times that we had to cheat the ministry. We had events that were right during one of our kids' soccer games. We'll have an event we're supposed to be at. We had short-term teams that were over and we say, you know what? We're sorry. We're going to leave you with our interns right now. We're going to go to our kids' soccer game. What? What do you mean you're doing that? We came all the way from the States to be here, and you're going to do that to us? And we're like, this is a value to us. So sometimes we cheated that. Other times we cheated our kids. We wanted to be at their game, but it was impossible for this other minister. Just sorry, this time we can't be there. And so that balance, don't feel bad when you miss some on either side, because that is part of this give and take and choosing to cheat. Sometimes you choose to cheat your ministry. Sometimes you choose to cheat your family. making sure that you're not cheating both of them so much, or either one of them so much that you lose them. And so finding that balance, again, it's never 50-50.
It doesn't feel like a balance. It's very rare that anybody goes, I feel like I got this balance thing down. Usually everybody's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying, but I don't know. What we do also recognize is now that, our kids are older, is our lives were very intertwined too. It wasn't all about, it didn't fit into boxes. And so just naturally, our kids were also a part of our ministries. It wasn't a thing where we set them up saying, okay, now you're going to be involved in this because you're the pastor's kid. But it just naturally, they're at the church because we're all at the church right now. And we just tried to, what's the word? We didn't protect them, but we
involved them.
We involved them because we felt like God had called. When he called Rich and Lisa Brown to be missionaries, he knew where we were going to go. He knew what kids he was going to give us. And so that grace that fell on us falls on our children too. And so our lives are intertwined, and just as much as we're invested in the things that they're doing as little children, they're also just involved in ours and what we're doing. And I think that was a healthy thing in the end.
There was a tension, though.
There was a tension, but I think it was good tension.
So we did. Lisa sings in a band, a Peruvian band called Corbin, and Corbin's been at Life Conference and other things. But we did these crazy tours. One time we did 167 presentations in 167 days, and we tried to homeschool that year. That was terrible.
Our kids will now say they learned nothing that year.
It's a different kind of learning.
It's a different kind of education, totally.
That's right.
And so
We knew how to pack gear into a truck. That's what we learned.
Yeah. And so here we are going from church to church. Finally, after the first couple of months, my oldest two kids said, you know what? We're out. We're staying with Grandpa the rest of the year. They were old enough. They were in 8th grade and
8th and 11th.
Yeah, they were older. And so, okay, we can do that. But we had to make those adjustments as a family along the way. Another time we were doing a 40-day tour through South America, and one of our kids was like, they were introverted. We're both kind of extroverted, we're off the charts extroverted. And so our poor introverted kids who are saying, hold on a second, we're going into every night in a new person's home we've never met. We're going to a church, meeting all these people, and answering the same questions every night. Where are you from? What do you do? How old are you? And it's frustrating us. And we had to, me mostly, take a step back and say, hold on a second. What are we doing here to our kids? Paul also says, don't exasperate your children.
Right.
And so what are we doing? And so we tried to find a healthy balance. Okay, we'll arrive to the church. You can stay in the van with the blacked out windows after we set everything up, because everybody comes in Latin America. You have to greet everyone. So you come and greet everybody, then go back in the van, close yourself in, watch your Netflix or whatever you're watching, your shows that we brought. And then during the concert, you don't have to talk to anybody. After the concert, you have to come back out and say, talk to people again, so that you can be recharged in the van, and then you can handle being with people again. So learning those things, learning about our kids, learning about ourselves and our personalities and how we can intertwine them for the kingdom is part of that balance, and finding out who I'm choosing to cheat when and where.
That's good. Yeah. And you've got a question. I've just got a real quick example. Like my son Cole yesterday, I said, man, I'm going to invite so-and-so over. We'll go out to workshop and we'll hang out a little bit and we'll watch a football game. And Cole heard me say that. And he's like, Dad, maybe someday you and I could order a pizza and we could go to a workshop and we could do that. And so there's a bit of me going, yes, we've got to make that happen. Cause dude wants to be involved in the things that moms and dads are involved with. Go ahead, Josh. What was your question, dude?
No, I was just going to say, I think what you have both been talking about is like really amazing. And I'm picking up like 3 main pieces there. One is you've got to learn and study your kids and understand what they need and where they're at. And this is emotionally, this is spiritually, this is all of those things. So that's one piece maybe we could talk about. The second is you've got to develop some values for your family and for your parenting. You know, I've said to Jen multiple times through COVID and through like the stress and changes of schooling, I'm like, you know what? I'm okay if our kids repeat this grade, to be honest. Like, stressing about academics is not a high value for me. And so I'm more concerned about where they're at, where their hearts are at, what God is doing in their lives. And so if that's a thing that needs to happen, I'm willing to kill that thing in order for the more important things to thrive. So figuring out values for your parenting. And then the last one is probably related to those first two, and that's balance. And maybe we could talk about practical ways to, as parents in ministry, how do you balance those things well? Speaking of balancing, I've got one right here.
You set this up, I know.
Hi.
Hi.
So I wonder if we could maybe choose one of those and work through how do you do that well as a parent and ministry leader.
You could do the talk about, you said values, and then also
The balance.
Yeah. And what's the third one?
Yeah, so I wrote them down. Learn and study your kids.
Yeah, that one.
Develop values for parenting.
Yeah.
And then the balancing act that you kind of have to do therein. So
Yeah. Well, with the very first, I think that's also a sign of a healthy family, is that you enjoy your children, you enjoy each other. It's not about I gotta go figure out what my kid likes. It's an actual, this is great, and I love this kid. I want to know what they love, and I want to spend time. I want to go get a pizza and do those things. In each stage of their life, we've really been able to say we have enjoyed you, even when there have been times when you're like, oh my goodness, like what have we created? Once we sat down to get to know them, like you said, Josh, or just to hear the perspective, how they're seeing things, it was such a developmental time. Like it honestly is, to their credit, the things that we've learned along the way. We're so grateful for them. So yes, that whole connection piece of wanting to be with your children or with each other as spouses, the family unit, the getting to know how you see and perceive things, how you interpret things, it's all very good. And then the needs as well. What do you need? What do you need intellectually? Because each kid is different. Yeah. What do you need as far as resting, emotionally, and socially? Yeah, and then, some of our kids get sicker easier than other kids, even physically. Yeah. They have different needs.
It's the love languages. Learning what love language your kid has is so important. It's finding out how they give love, but also how do they receive love. I was a tickler with my kids. I love to tickle my kids. Well, one of my kids didn't like to be tickled. That was my connection point. Now what? I tickle you and you get mad. I need to change that a little bit. What other thing can we do that will show love? And so finding out the love languages of each, and those are fluid too. They can change a little bit with time and as they grow older. And so not being stuck in, this is their favorite love language now is always going to be it. No, it changes. And sometimes it's quality time. Sometimes it's physical touch. Sometimes it's gift giving and receiving, sometimes it's, what are the other ones? I call it quality touch.
Acts of service.
Acts of service is the other one. Words of affirmation. So finding these, and it's an old book, but man, it's rich when you start applying it in your family. So personality and love languages and spiritual gifts and what makes them tick and what their favorite shows are, what their favorite video games are, and playing those with them. And I hate playing video games. I stink at them. But finding those connections.
And just real quick, another thing about during this pandemic, during this time of COVID, so many of us parents have thought, okay, well, we're stuck together. So what we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of this time and teach them all the things that, when life is normal, we never had the time to do, or we felt like we should have done more of. And we were talking recently to a psychologist who was saying, This is not the time to take advantage of and teach and teach and teach them manners and teach them. This is the time for connection. This is the time to say, hey, teach me your favorite game. I don't know how to play it. This isn't the time to prohibit all screen time. It's a time to actually get involved in some of their interests. What's a show that you really like? Can I sit down and watch it? This is especially for pre-adolescents and adolescents, sharing some of their interests instead of always calling the shot on how we're going to connect today.
That's good. Yeah. Walk us into then like parenting values. And you may not have these like, vinyled up on your wall or above your doorway on some sort of placard, but maybe could you guys quickly articulate maybe some of the shared parenting values that maybe you could identify? And then as an example, and then maybe you could kind of go about, how did you arrive at that? Was that an intentional conversation? Did they just kind of like appear? But like, how do you parent? What are the values that you hold really dear in your parenting?
Yeah, we're still learning those as well, and they do morph along the way. But some of the values have helped us, and to write them down have been some of these movies and things. What was that book that we got that one time? A Gift, The Ultimate Gift. That was like 10 years ago now. Look it up though; it was really good at the time. And then now the newer one, the movie, The Arrow. Was it the Arrow's movie? Oh. About how to parent.
We see all this in Spanish, so now we don't know what they're called, but yeah.
Anyway, it's a movie. Look up Arrow movie, Christian Arrow movie, and it'll come up. It actually has a whole graph on how to write for each kid, and if the arrow is, we want them to shoot out like an arrow, and where they want to go, we want them to follow Christ. And our values are, our number one value is we want our kids to love God and love people. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. Love your neighbors yourself. If we can teach our kids those two values and they can instill them in themselves and their kids, we can die and go to heaven. If they memorize the Bible or not, if they know all the other doctrines, and if they go to the churches, we want them to go. No, those things are all secondary. We want them to love God and love people.
And we've learned that looks differently. As we've matured, we realize how each kid loves God is different from the way we would say, oh, that person is a Christian because they go to church, they pray before meals. All those indicators have now changed. Okay, so we got to let those go and look at the heart of the matter. Do our kids love God? How do I know that my kid loves God? The priorities in their life, the way that they make time for God. It might be different from the way I make time for God, but they do make time for God. They do consult. They try to die to self and live for Christ. All those things, they look differently in the practical sense, but the heart issue is still there. And then how do they love others? We're very big proponents of this. We've even written a book, it's in Spanish, but we've written a book about ministering together with your children, teaching them how to serve, because through service is when you have God encounters. When you are in the rough places that as parents, we intuitively kind of want to protect our kids from, it's actually in those places that they are able to see God. And we want them to have God encounters. So yeah, our value is love God. And for them to love God, they need to have encounters with God. Okay. And then second, love people. And to do that, we need to teach them and be an example of loving people in our own lives. And how can we do that practically and just in our daily lives?
Those are the big ones, spiritually. But then you go through each area of your life as a family. So the spiritual, the social, what are your social values as a family? And that includes you have to study your introvertedness and your extrovertedness as a family. What does it look like? And even mentally, how are we going to grow as a family and challenge each other mentally in our discussions? In our family, it's discussions. And socially, it's games as well, things like that. But so body, soul, mind, and strength, kind of going to those areas and seeing how we can connect with others and with God and with ourselves in those areas. But it is specific ones we could give you. We could say, okay, the more specific one is we took our kids to school every day because it was a high value for Lisa. When she knew that after the first 15 minutes that the school was out, if we could talk to our kids then, they're more likely to tell us what happened at school that day. And so that's what we did. And then to be at all their sporting events, because it was a big value of mine. And so figuring out what values are important to you and as a family. And we did it with our kids when they were little. We sat around the table and talked a little bit. What value do you guys see? And what things do you guys have? And we came up with an idea as a family to do a mission every week. And so the mission is this week, we're going to find someone in need and we're going to do something to help their need. And so every day we'd say, did you find someone at school today? Oh yeah, somebody dropped their books and I helped them pick it up. Okay, that's a little bit of a need. How about something more? Oh, somebody came.
We didn't judge them. It was somebody, like, good job.
Somebody
judged. Yeah, that's not really
one bar instead of five. But having that idea of having eyes to see people in need and not just saying it. And so making a mission each week that we could do from first grade up to 12th grade, give somebody your lunch because they didn't have a lunch today or whatever it was. And so those kinds of things were values that we have. And basically any important event, if there's a graduation, we're there. If there's a wedding, we're there. If there's a birth, we're there. If there's anything important like that, those special moments, we want to be there.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. So lead students, if you think back through your buckets, you'll remember that we'll do physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. We probably need to add a fifth bucket, relational. But think back through those, and you can think that through that as a family as well. But I'm also hearing them say heart, soul, mind, strength, love your neighbor as yourself. It's just some primary buckets to begin to think about what's really important in each one of those categories. Think that out, write them down, and begin to say, these are the behaviors that would let us know that this value is working its way out, right? And this is the behavior of yes and the behavior of no. So guys, let's get into this final piece. And if you're just joining us, I'll just kind of pause here for a minute and say, we're joined by Rich and Lisa Brown on Lead Live today. We're talking parenting and ministry. We've already got a couple of questions that are coming in. If you want to put your question in the queue, go ahead and make a comment, and we'd be glad to get to those. But we're talking parenting and ministry, and we would love to answer your questions here in a minute. So, Rich, Lisa, give us about this. What's the balancing act? And one word that I wrote down early in our conversation was boundaries. How do I know? And you started to describe a little bit introversion, extroversion, go to the van, recharge in there in a way that's a bit of a boundary issue. But what if you realize all of a sudden, man, I am not setting good boundaries for my family because we're just all involved. All of us want to be greeting. All of us want to be serving. All of us want to be together all the time. But you realize that's probably not the best thing, right, to be happening. So how do we know boundaries? How do we know balance when it comes to parenting and ministry?
That's good. Again, we're not speaking as experts. We're still learning this. My kids are here listening, so I have to say that.
we gotta put that in front of everything we say.
It's a tough one because every family's different, every child's different, every parent's different, every church is different. But I think there's some things that we've learned that have helped. Number one is a new concept from an old theology that we've kind of let slip by, and that's the word Sabbath. Finding that parentheses in our week, like God did as he created the world 6 days, and then he rested, and he showed us as parents what we need to do. We need to rest. Now, we used to, for 20 years of our ministry, it was all about the day off. A day off. We're going to be intentional about our day off. And we got, in some ways, on the mission field sometimes made fun of because we wouldn't go to the church events that they were having on the Monday that was our day off because I wanted to spend time with my kids. Oh, you can spend time with them every night. Why don't you do that? I was like, no, I've got to be intentional about that. And that helped. I'd play soccer with them, or they'd come and watch me play soccer when they were little. But having those days off was a first step. And making sure that the day off is not a day off from the family, but a day off from the ministry. And so making sure that is a communication piece. You're communicating to your kids that on your day off, you want to be with them and your spouse. They're more important than what you're doing. That's why on your day off, you're going to do that. However, this whole Sabbath idea is something that I think would really, if the evangelical church would embrace it again. We used to say, oh, that's legalism. Jesus, he healed on the Sabbath. And he said, yeah, if there's an ox in the pit, then that's okay. You can do that. Let's not be legalists about that. But it's the only of the 10 commandments that if you skip it, you don't do it, and you work harder on that Sabbath instead of resting, if you keep the Sabbath, you could get fired for. Your church say, oh, you're not doing enough. But if you don't keep it, you're working really hard, you can be applauded for, oh, you're so great as a pastor. Look at all you do. And so that word Sabbath, Lisa can explain it more. She's actually working on some of these studies herself in the Canadian Alliance.
I mean, not explain it more, but we read a really great book that we recommend called Subversive Sabbath by Swoboda. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. And it was just so inspiring that, God rested not because he needed to rest, because he wanted to enjoy his creation. And really, we have that need to enjoy the things that are around us that we were made for. Like, it is wonderful to be able to take time, a whole day. And it's important that it's like a whole day where you're not, hours. Where you're actually present. Like, what I realized in my own life is the opposite of rest is not work. It's unrest or restlessness. Mm-hmm. And we were both in a pattern of life where we were restless, where we didn't know how to take it down a notch and just relax and enjoy things. We especially Rich, but both of us were very much restless people. And that has really spoken to me, and it's really changed for the better our relationship between each other and with our children, of absolutely having a strict day, like putting that boundary, putting that limit, and saying, this is going to be 24 hours, and I'm not going to live in the past, and I'm not going to live in the future of what I've got to do, but I'm going to live in the present. And that part was hard for me, because even though I'm not as hyperactive as my husband,
just active,
I feel like if I don't get a step up on things, if I don't check my emails, if I don't prepare for tomorrow starting now, I'm going to be behind, because I need a little more time than other people. So just disciplining myself to absolutely not even catch up on emails, to let that go. And then tomorrow is going to be another day. Being present is such a hard exercise for those of us in the ministry, but it is key. And especially those of you guys who have little ones, it's key to start now, getting good patterns in your life where you actually have a Sabbath, and then your kids will look forward to a Sabbath. One real quick story in this book, it talks about how the Jewish tradition was that when their children woke up in the morning on Sabbath morning, they would give them a spoonful of honey to set the mood of the day, that today was a decadent, sweet day that they could look forward to. So
they could have the rest of the week, though, right? They weren't allowed to have it the rest of the week. And
honey
on
was hard to come
by. Two things come to mind as you were saying that, Lisa, was like, number one, if the wheels fall off of the organization, the church ministry, in 24 hours, that means I've not built a very good thing, right? And that probably should burn and die. So if I can't leave it alone for 24 hours, then there's something else going on in the other 6 days of the week that is just not great. Number one. So I have to, sometimes I have to remind myself of that fact. It's like, no, I've worked all week, and I think it can be okay for a 24-hour period, or, a day and a half, or maybe even 2 days, like it could be fine if we've built it right the other days of the week. Number one. Number two, I heard John Stumbo say, he was at a pastors and wives retreat in the district that I'm in. And he said, you know what, you can rest when you trust. Mm-hmm. And when you trust, the outflow of that trust is Sabbath. And I've always had that in the back of my head, is like, oh man, if I'm just working and working and working, that means something, my trust is off. right?
Yeah.
Because I can rest when I trust, and I Sabbath when I trust, and that's just the outflow of it. So I'll just compound what you've said so eloquently. But if I can't leave it alone for a time and focus on something else that is truly going to last over time, which is my family, my children relationships, my spouse relationship, there's something broken in that system that I've created as a leader. So we've got to pay attention to that for sure. Tell me more about.
I want to say one thing about this too, because one thing that I see, especially in younger leaders, as they start having families, is recognizing that trust isn't just for a single day. That's for all of your ministry. And that when you do that, I think a lot of younger leaders feel guilty about working, and they overcompensate in the other way. They're coming in late, leaving early, or just everything is I have to be with the family kind of thing. And like to be able to celebrate that, no, especially in ministry, this is what God has called you to. And as you said, things change. Balance isn't always the same. Time spent doesn't always look the same, but that there is beauty in all of that, in the family and in the ministry, and when those circles overlap, and really being able to embrace both of those with a trust and a sense of God's leadership is good. So work is not bad. Sabbath is beautiful. Give it all you got.
That balance again is important. God worked 6 of the 7 days. Don't forget that. You can't have 7 days of Sabbath.
Right.
And if you do, you're gonna miss out on life and what God has for you. But finding that balance is important. Yeah.
And we do want to go back to that whole restful versus restless idea.
Yeah.
Especially, I'm going to go with whoever the caretaker of the children, the primary caregiver. If you go and say, we're just going to have a family day, well, if every day is a family day for that primary caregiver, that doesn't feel different. It doesn't feel like a rest. It's still full of restlessness. That's so it's again, knowing each other and figuring out how you can make this an experience of restfulness, whatever that takes, and maybe taking turns. Yeah.
As leaders, we've been trained to do, typically. But do, go get it done. And that's good, except for rest is, okay, now I'm not going to do anymore. I'm just going to be. And that's really tough for those of us that can be addicted to work. And so finding that parentheses. I read this year the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and it slapped me across the face. I was like, what in the world is this? And it was hard, but I think there's some good principles there that we can't forget as we get older and as we continue to do more. The higher you go in leadership, the more busy you can be or appear to be. And so making sure that you find that balance of rest and Sabbath in there. The other extreme is, God doesn't expect us to never be focused and doing, because he did 6 days. So if you rest 6 days, you're being lazy. That's a different topic.
That's good. No, that's really good. Hey, we do have a question. Let's answer it. So there's a question from Isaac Charles. I'll put this on the screen for us. Isaac says, with our present generation, kids having great reasoning and thinking abilities, how important is it for the ministry leaders to really walk the talk? Because when our children feel that there's no integrity in us, it leads to greater trouble. Your thoughts on this, please. So let's talk about just this integrity piece for us as parents, and that we're walking the talk. I would love for Isaac to expound a little bit more on that. But how does that hit you, Browns? Where would you take an answer to that particular question from Isaac?
Me or you? Go ahead.
We feel very strongly about this, and that it's a great question. I think you answered it in there. We did a survey. We were getting ready to write a book in Spanish again on
Pastors' kids.
And so we
just quickly, 2 books. One is for the pastor's kids. One is for the pastor and the congregation. So it's cool. 2 books in one, so that they can kind of change some of the cycles of bad thinking in that.
Yeah. So we did an encuesta. We did a questionnaire. We got
Poll
online, and we did a poll. That's it. And we had in one weekend 2,000 responses from pastors' kids
in Latin America.
And like, how specific is that? Yeah, and all Spanish-speaking Latin American kids. And the top concern was my parent wasn't the same person behind the pulpit that he was in our home. That ruined it for them completely, and they completely turned away from God because dad was one thing, mom was one thing inside the church walls, and something else outside of the church walls. So to your question, absolutely, we have to be who we say we are. We have to be authentic. We have to be integral. Is that an English word?
Yeah.
Yes. In that our words and our deeds match up. And not only do our words and deeds match up when we're being observed or when we're in our workplace inside the church, but also everywhere else that we go.
If we talk about honesty on Sunday and then somebody calls and the kids answer, say, tell them we're not here, we just ruined our sermon in our kids' lives that we preached on Sunday. And so having that having that integrity of who I am always, and that we don't see that as much as we used to. It doesn't seem like people seem to be different in certain circumstances. And your kids are watching you 24/7. So no matter where you are, they're watching you. And if you're being different, they can call you on it. My kids call us on it. They were like, why would you say that? That's not really right, Dad. And we'd have to apologize. And, as they get older, they can call you on these things. But making sure that you're the same person behind closed doors as you are out in the pulpit is a must for all leaders, not just church leaders, but all leaders and Christians across the board. We have to be integral.
And I just want to add there too, we should all be developing. Our faith should always be growing. So my faith 20 years ago was very different from what it is today. I want to say, I hope it's matured a whole lot. I think back in the day, it was a lot. I had more answers than I do today.
We were a lot more black and white when we were younger, and we didn't know more.
Yeah, they fit into cute little boxes way back when that they don't fit into now. But that's also a path that I want to take in an integral way, where I am open and I can say, I don't know how I feel about this anymore, and I'm starting to think maybe God wants me to change in this way or that way. And then just being absolutely available to my children in my own faith walk, that things do change. I see things differently now. I hear from the word of God differently now than I did when I was 20. And inviting our children, inviting our spouses into that kind of development, into the doubts, and then the deconstruction and the reconstruction that God is doing of our faith is a really good thing. It helps connect them to you as well. And it feels authentic because it is authentic.
How do you get from your collect information from your children? So mine are 6 and 8. And at this point, like, how do I get an integrity check from them? Like, what information would you say, well, Clint, you need to ask them, right? I'm assuming that I'm just not gonna look at their behavior, but now at this age, I can go and ask them. So what's a good question for me to ask Cole and Lorena to see if what I present to ministry leaders and I present on the road to this and that event is the same? Are they seeing daddy in both places, I guess? So what's a good question that I might be able to ask my little ones?
That's a great question. I think it's hard for the little ones at those ages, 6 and 10, you said, or 6 and 8?
6 and 8. Yeah.
So they're not going to remember, a week ago probably. So it probably has to be a question. I mean, they do remember impactful things, but asking things when they happen. And so, after you preach, come down and say, what'd you guys think? Do you think Daddy lives that, what I just said? Have you ever seen Daddy do this or the opposite of what I just said?
Yep.
Just to ask. And I think more it's going to come out as they grow older. They're going to call you on it, whether you ask for it or not. They're going to say, wait a second, you said that it's wrong to do this, but you did this. And how is this not the same? And as they get older, they start putting 2 and 2 together and saying, this is not what I thought you taught me. And sometimes it's a great opportunity to say, actually, I described it wrong. I explained it to you wrong when you were younger. This is what the true principle is, or the value. But at the age of your kids now, it's hard to call them. You don't want to say, hey, I spoke on sanctification yesterday. Do you see your dad as a sanctified? You obviously have to lower it down to their level. But one of the things that we've learned from psychologists is you get down eyeball to eyeball with them. You kneel down, you sit down, and you talk to them at their level, not up to down, but eyeball to eyeball, and ask them things, and they're more apt to tell you. If you do ask them, they'll be brutally honest. That's the beauty of kids, unless they read that you're going to punish them for it. But they're probably going to be very honest. Can you think of a question?
Yeah, well, I think that when they're younger, what you're establishing are patterns that allow for availability, vulnerability, dialogue instead of just sermons or teaching moments. And also, as you set up your routines in your family life, they point to all your values, right? So maybe they're not processing in the moment, but come 15-year-old, they're going to go, wait a minute. And they're going to say, we always did this. So when your kids are younger, these moments are not going to be about conversations as much as the challenging of routines in your life. Your routines point to your values. And so what we always did this, Daddy.
And now you're doing
is going to come back to bite you.
if you try to change it.
If you haven't thought it through. And remember, you're setting up these patterns to allow for the things that you want. Basically, in the end, what we're talking about is connection, right? We just always want to be connected with our children. So even if they make bad decisions and they say, I don't want to follow the Lord, they still love you, and there's still a connection so that you can continue to influence them and point them towards God.
That's good. Yeah, thanks, guys. Cool.
There
is another question, Josh, from Isaac. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, let's do it. So Isaac follows up and he asks how do you convince your children when they don't agree with what God has called you into or called you to do? So at what point as a parent is it, listen, this is what God said, this, we've got to pursue it. And how much of it is this kind of family consensus of what you should be doing?
That's good. So we think that our calling is a lot greater than it is. Usually our calling is go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And then we kind of get a specific calling, and then we go do that. And we kind of throw away around the word calling, maybe a little more than we should, but we do have specific callings, and we pray and we believe God is moving us to go a certain way, or it's a compelling that we go a certain way. And so in these different callings that we have to differentiate between the overarching call, which is go and make disciples, and the specific call. So when is it, which one is the call that the child is not happy with? Let's say that you're called, or you believe that God has called you to be a pastor of a church, and your kid is saying, that's great for you, but he's not calling me to do that. Or you're already a pastor, but hey, that's your calling, not mine. We do have to be sensitive to kids. Again, the verse of not exasperating our kids comes to mind. We got to be very careful not to, suck it up, princess. God put you in this family. Now you got to do it. But also, again, balancing it out and saying, okay, you may be right that it's not your calling, but God did put you in our family, and it's the calling that the rest of us have. Therefore, we're going to come to grips with, again, it depends how old the kids are, but if they're already saying they don't agree with the calling, they're probably a teenager-ish. And so we could say, all right, what do you think would be fair as parents to make you do? Some things you have to do with us because it's our family value, and which ones are the ones that you think you don't need to participate in and it can still keep our family integrity and our family values. And so bring them into the conversation and say, even though you don't agree with this is what we believe, and we're the parents here. When you're a parent, you can do with your kids what you want or what you believe is right. But for now, this is what we believe God's called us to do. I'm not going to make you stand up and sing. I'm not going to make you witness from the platform if you don't believe that maybe you're not even a Christian. I don't know. But, I'm not going to make you do things that wouldn't be integral, talk about integrity again, to who you are either and what your faith journey is. So making sure that we give them that opportunity.
Yeah, Isaac, I think that's a really good question. A quick example, I remember when I was 10 and my brother, I have 3 brothers, they were 12, 14, and 18. And the Alliance asked my dad to move us from Argentina, Spanish-speaking South America,
where you were born,
to where I was born, to Australia to go on loan and teach at the seminary there. And that was such a big move that would affect the whole family, that we had a family meeting and we sat down, and I remember him laying it out, the pros and cons and all the rest of it, and then saying, how do you guys feel about it? And all I remember is feeling, and I was 10, is just how privileged I felt that my dad would ask me how I felt about this. And so when he gave us a chance to vote, it was just, all of us, I think, were like, well, Dad, whatever you and Mom say, like, we're happy to go, but thank you. Like, we just felt so appreciated that we were considered, our feelings were considered. I think that when we have opportunities to lay out what God is calling in our life and say, how do you feel about that? You get a lot of respect and love from your kids, even if your kids say, I don't really want to do that. I think they understand when you say, I think God's calling me to, and that I have to die to myself and live for Christ, and you're part of, and everything Rich said, and you're part of our family, so we're going to do it.
And to go a little step further on this, maybe they're not preaching or leading the music because they don't agree with it, but maybe because you have the value of service as a family, if that is a value of yours, then you say, okay, so which ones of these do you want to do, or do you think that you could do? Can you clean the church? Maybe that's your job. Yeah. You clean the church. You don't agree with everything else, but you can clean the church. Or maybe it's, you prepare the bulletin, or whatever you do, that you do the Zoom meeting. What is it to get them involved, even if they don't really, their heart's not in it, let them know that because you have the value of service or whatever that ends up being, that you allow them to choose where they're going to participate in it.
Yeah.
Good. You may have, just as I'm hearing you talk, you may have an introvert extrovert issue, as right. As you mentioned earlier in our conversation. It's not that they hate everything about it. It's just that we're not providing enough space for that personality to really go, oh, all right, cool, I like this, because it's a different kind of rhythm than what the adults want to keep. There might be a child in there that needs a different rhythm. And so being able to accommodate that and to reinforce that as a good and valuable thing, since God did create them that way, and to celebrate who God is making them to be, is super important as we're hopefully developing our children as ministry leaders, right? They might not be in the church, but hopefully we're developing them to lead really well in their spheres of influence.
And if our parenting goes back to connection, I think that's a great opportunity for you to connect with your kids and say, hey, this is what your mom and I are sensing God's calling us to. What excites you about that? What are you afraid of if we move into that at a discipleship level? Like, what is God saying to you for what our family should be giving our time and attention to. All of those things allows you to connect. If you just drop it as this is what we're doing, get on board, or sorry, then that's not good. But to be able to discuss those things together, and make sure what do you think the expectations on you would be? We've had that conversation with our kids, especially with our oldest, who's now 10. Like, do you feel like people have expectations, or that your mom and I have specific expectations on you that you feel are unfair? Like we just are constantly having those conversations to make sure, as the most important thing for us isn't that our kids perform at a certain level, but that their affection for God continues to grow.
Absolutely.
That's right.
So that's kind of how we measure. We don't measure how much of the Bible they, like you guys said, how much of the Bible they know or memorize. Like, what's your affection for God, your love for God, and making sure we're putting them in positions where that can continue to grow and thrive.
That's good. Somebody said 80% of pastors' kids hate being on the platform. 20% of them like it too much.
Mm-hmm.
That's hilarious.
So trying to figure out which one your kids are and trying to balance that act is really a challenge. But Isaac, man, we're with you.
Yeah.
Hang in there. It is tough. It is a time of give and take. Sometimes you can let them make decisions, and sometimes you got to make the decision. And it is that balance, that pulling back and forth a little bit. The other thing we want to say, just to help with all of us and in our lives, we found that we needed professional help as a family as well. And we, as a couple, and each one of our kids, and let's not shy away from that. Just because, some people may think that it's all demons, or some people think it's all, and, if you just read this book or whatever it might be, then maybe it does work. Find what works for you. In our case, we find that preventing before it gets so bad that it's too late is good. And so we see a Christian psychologist every couple of weeks or so, and that helps us. That's not the church. In some ways, has always kind of looked as a distance at Christian psychologists, but we found it to be a life giver and protector, and keeping us together as a family, as a couple, and our kids, even when they were little, we took them to different counselors and things, and that was a good thing. That broke the ice from the beginning, so that it wasn't taboo. Christians shouldn't have to have problems.
That's good. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, we really value our mental health partners that we have within the LEAD program, and Christina and I have rested heavily on some of that in our past, and I think that's a sweet rhythm to have. Josh, I'm looking at our time. I think we could take another hour to talk about parenting and ministry. But let's get into some final thoughts as we think about this conversation. So Josh, go ahead, buddy. Final thoughts on parenting and ministry from your perspective.
Yeah, I think when it comes to parenting, just like you're not married to the same person that you married so many years ago, that your spouse is constantly changing and growing and has different thoughts and likes and values. Like, your kids are going to grow and develop into new people as they grow. And so invest in getting to know them regularly and over and over again. I've got one kid who doesn't care what I share about her on a Sunday morning when I'm preaching. And then just a couple of weeks ago, I talked to my 8-year-old son. I said, "Hey, buddy, do you mind if I share this experience?" And he goes, "You can share it as long as you don't laugh at me." And so it was just like a great insight to him to know, like, okay, this is okay if it's framed in this way, and to help people understand in a certain way. And he's not just the butt of a joke. Yeah. So invest in getting to know your kids and what they are concerned about and excited about in your family, in ministry, and in their relationship with the Lord.
It's good. Rich, Lisa, final thoughts on this parenting and ministry conversation. Lisa, why don't you go first? I'll plug you first. I see you looking at your hubby like, oh, are you going to go on me?
Which one?
Yeah. No, but Lisa, what is the final thought that you would carry out of this conversation or kind of wrap up with?
Sure. I my heart always goes out to people who did not think it would turn out the way that it's turning out. And I just want to say, he who began a good work is faithful to complete it. And it's not too late to form that connection, connections that have been severed, misunderstandings, problems. It's not too late. I always want to, whenever we talk about parenting, I want to speak to those that are going through a tough time when it feels very dark, and let you know that you're not alone and God is with you. And it's your investment will see fruit. God promises us that, and we can claim those promises in these times. Just remain open and willing for God to do a work in you through whatever is going on.
That's really good.
Rich, how about for you? Final thought on today's conversation.
Man, if there's one thing we could tell everyone who has children, it would be to find 5 accomplices, spiritual accomplices that they could find. Someone who you trust as a parent that could pray for your kid. 5 different people, maybe in the church, maybe not in the church. Maybe it's an aunt or uncle. Somebody who will take them out to eat every once in a while, make them feel special and listened to. Take them to the park, play ball with them, have a Coke together, whatever it is, but that they would be intentional to pray for your kids and to love on your kids, and someone that your kid already kind of connects with anyway, you know, one of those family members who's like maybe a little older, or somebody that can say, hey, I'll take you under my wing and just help point them in the right direction towards Christ. That helps. That's like the trampoline that helps us as parents go even farther than we could go on our own. And I think that's finding the right people is hard, but sometimes it's only 2 or 3, but find someone that you could trust, or 5 people you could trust, and these accomplices that could help springboard you towards Christ.
That's good. Great. Yeah, that's really good. I think my final thought for today, I just really appreciated that, always connecting with our kids, you know, at the beginning of our conversation, like it's about attunement. Christina and I are trying to really attune to each one of our kids. Cole is on one frequency, Lorena is on her own. And so but it's our job. They shouldn't have to tune to me.
That's right.
I tune to them. Like, so I'm changing the frequency of my heart and my attitude towards each one of those small people that Jesus has entrusted to me. And so that is the ministry. That's the work that we're to do within our homes. And I do, both Christina and I, we want to have children, as you have said so splendidly. We want them to love God, and we want them to do that first and to seek him. And there would be no bigger travesty in our walk with the Lord in our ministry years if we just didn't show them and model for them how much God loves them. And I'm always going to be a proponent that says, well, good or for ill, I am going to, like, when they associate who God is, they're going to look at me first, and they're going to say either, yeah, my dad modeled who God was for me, or he didn't. And man, I don't want to put anything in their little heart or mind that's going to be undermining who God truly is. And so anyway, that's a big calling, right? Just to be a parent, let alone a parent in ministry. But it's not all roses and sunshine.
That's right.
And at the same time, we're always growing, we're always learning, we're always changing. And thankfully, Jesus will make all of us look like himself as we grow in him. And that's a blessing. That's the reinforcing factor for me. Right. Rich, Lisa, thank you so much for joining Josh and I on Lead Live today. We thank you for your time, and we appreciate your ministry so very much. Josh, man, until next time, we will dive into another conversation next week. We get to hang out with our friend Joe Dixon, who is an Alliance Church planter, planting among deaf and hard of hearing in the Cleveland area. And I can't wait to have this conversation with Joe Dixon on our next adventure of Lead Live. Take us out, dude.
Hey, until next time, leaders, lead on. Peace.